بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to episode 35 of the series The Authentic Statements of the Companions. In this episode we will take the statement of Umar bin Qadar of Allah in which he said, نَفِرُّ مِنْ قَدَرِ اللَّهِ إِلَى قَدَرِ اللَّهِ. We escape or run away from the Qadar of Allah to the Qadar of Allah. And the context behind his statement is Abdullah ibn Abbas anhuma narrates that Umar bin Qadar one time went out on a journey to Asham. And he had a group of the companions with him on that journey. And when he was in Sarq, which is an area in between Medina and Sham, the leaders of the armies, Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah and the people with him, his companions, met Umar bin Khattab in that area in between Medina and Sham. So Umar left with a group of companions on this journey, left Medina heading towards Asham, and in the middle, before he got to Asham, Abu Ubaidah and the rest of the people with Abu Ubaidah met Umar, and they told him that the plague has befallen in Asham. The plague is spreading. There's this deadly disease that's has spread in Asham. And so Umar told Ibn Abbas anhuma to call the Muhajirin, the early Muhajirin who made Hijrah early on. And so he called them, and Umar consulted with them. He asked them what they thought. Do you think we should continue towards Asham even though there's the plague there, or should we go back to Medina? And they disagreed. They differed. Some said, we don't think you should go on forward towards Asham and bring the companions and the people with you. Those are the remaining companions of the Prophet ﷺ. We don't think you should expose them to this deadly disease that's very contagious to the plague. We don't think that you should take them continue to Asham. Rather, you should go back. And others from them, from the Muhajirin, disagreed. They said, you set out to do something. We think you should go on with it, carry on ahead with it, and continue towards Asham, even though there's the plague there. And so he dismissed them, and he asked Ibn Abbas anhuma to call for him the Ansar. And so he called the Ansar and he asked them. He asked for their advice and consulted with them, and they also went the same path as the Muhajirin. They differed, and a group said, we set out on this journey. We see that you keep going until you get to Asham. And the other group said, no, we disagree. We think you should go back. Don't expose the rest of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ who have remained, who are here with you on this journey. We don't think you should expose them to the plague, and we think you should go back to Medina. And so he dismissed them again, and then he called the elderly of Quraysh, those who did Hijrah during the year of Al-Fath, the Fath Makkah, the conquest of Mecca. And so he called those elderly companions from Quraysh, and he asked them, he consulted with them, and they all agreed. Not two of them disagreed on with each other. So they all agreed. They said, we think you should take the people back to Medina, and don't expose them, don't take them upon this plague. And so Umar announced amongst the people, he said, in the morning I'm mounting my ride back, and we're returning to Medina, basically. So Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah said to Umar radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with them both, they're both great companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So Abu Ubaidah said, أَفِرَارًا مِنْ قَدَرِ اللَّهِ, are we running away from the Qadar of Allah? So Umar said, yes, we're running away from the Qadar of Allah to the Qadar of Allah. Umar replied, he said, yes, we're running away from the Qadar of Allah to the Qadar of Allah, meaning they're both part of the Qadar of Allah. Again, explaining the right way of understanding the Qadar of Allah. It's not going where the plague is. It's not or trying to run away from the Qadar of Allah, because in reality we can't run away from the Qadar of Allah. It's all part of the Qadar of Allah, whether they go towards Asham or whether they stop and return towards Medina. It's all part of the Qadar of Allah. And Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu continued and explained by giving an example. He said, if there's a valley and you have animals, and you went down that valley, and that had two parts. One that is, that it was, had a lot of greenery, and the other one was, didn't have any vegetation or any greenery, and was barren. And you decided to have your animals graze in the one that had, vegetation, versus the barren one. Wouldn't you be, if you chose this one, you'd be doing it by the Qadar of Allah, and if you chose that one, you'd be doing it by the Qadar of Allah. Either one would be by the Qadar of Allah. It's all part of the Qadar of Allah, in other words. So Umar ibn Khattab said the statement: we run away from the Qadar of Allah to the Qadar of Allah. Again, indicating that all of it is part of the Qadar of Allah, and we can't truly, as people, whatever we decide to do, we can't escape the Qadar of Allah. It's all part of the Qadar of Allah that He has decreed for us. Then, afterwards, Abdurrahman bin Auf came, and he was absent from those gatherings, running some of his errands. And so when he came back and heard what they were talking about, he said, I have knowledge about that. I heard the Prophet ﷺ say that if you hear about it, about the plague in a land, then don't go there. Don't go there. And if it happens in a place where you are, then don't leave, running away from it. So again, Abdurrahman bin Auf shared with the rest of the companions this hadith that he had heard from the Prophet ﷺ about how to deal with exactly this scenario, exactly with this situation when there's a plague that happens somewhere, and you're not there, then you shouldn't go there. And if you hear that it happens somewhere, you shouldn't go there and expose yourself to it. And if it happens in a place where you are there, you shouldn't leave trying to run away from it, because again, that's one way through which it will end up spreading, and those people trying to run away from it will end up taking it to other places. So Umar, when he heard this hadith from Abdurrahman bin Auf, this hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, he praised Allah and thanked him, and then he left. So we learn so many lessons from this story. A very beautiful story. We see how Umar consulted with the rest of the companions. Yeah, he was the leader, he was the Khalifa of the Muslimin, but he didn't say, I'm the leader, I'm going to decide. He consulted with them. He saw what their opinions are. He discussed the matter with them in order to better arrive at the best decision. He didn't do that on his own, but rather he consulted with them. He took their opinion on the matter. We also see that the last word is for the leader. He's in the leadership position. He's entrusted with making that decision on behalf of himself and his followers. And so he made the decision himself. He consulted with them, but then he made the decision, and everyone else with him were going to follow his decision. Him being the Khalifa of the Muslims, him being their leader. We also see that he addressed people's concerns. He didn't just dismiss them or ignore them, but he also addressed the concern that Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah brought up. Are you running away from the Qadar of Allah? Are we running away from the Qadar of Allah? So he addressed that, he explained that, and he explained the proper way of understanding Qadar, this pillar of Iman that is very important, that if someone does not believe in the Qadar of Allah, the good and the bad, they are lacking or missing one of the pillars of Iman, one of the pillars of our faith. So it's a person is not a Muslim without believing in all the pillars of Iman. And Qadar, believing in Al-Qadar is one of them. And we see that also from the story, that despite the companions being knowledgeable, and Umar radiallahu anh being the best of them after Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, yet despite that doesn't mean that they knew everything. The companions didn't know, none of the companions or any of the people after the Prophet Muhammad knew everything. Their knowledge didn't encompass everything of the deen. And so no matter how knowledgeable a scholar may be today or in the past, or any of the companions individually in of themselves on their own, no one knows everything in the deen after the Prophet Muhammad and some might have knowledge that others don't. So we see in this case, Abdurrahman bin Auf had this hadith that he heard from the Prophet Muhammad which all the rest of the companions, including Umar ibn Khattab and Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah and the rest of the companions who were there with them on that journey, have not heard that hadith from the Prophet Muhammad. They didn't know about it. And we also see how humble the companions were, as knowledgeable as they were. Umar ibn Khattab, the Khalifa of the Muslims, the best of people after the Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr, the most knowledgeable, amongst very knowledgeable amongst the companions, the leader of the Muslims, and he still was humble to accept knowledge from others when he did not know about it. And we see how the companions of the Prophet Muhammad followed the hadith. If hadith reached them, it was from someone who's trustworthy, from a trustworthy source. If it's authentic, then they followed it. They followed the hadith of Prophet and they did not question it. They did not, set it to the side. They followed it. They submitted themselves to the guidance in the Quran and the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet. And we should follow their example. If we receive a hadith today that is authentic, that's from a trustworthy source, we know that it's true, that's authentic, that the Prophet ﷺ did in fact say this, then we should follow, we should submit to it and follow it. Of course, as long as we truly understand its proper meaning and within the proper context of the deen, but we shouldn't put any other statement in front of it. We shouldn't take what another scholar said that might conflict with that and reject an authentic hadith because of what someone else might have said, no matter who they are. We see how the companions followed the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, as long as it's from a trustworthy source, and they submitted to the guidance that the Quran and the Sunnah had, and they followed it. And we also learn what to do in the case from the story. We learn what to do in the case when there's a plague or a contagious disease in an area. Then if it happens somewhere, we shouldn't go there. And if it happens in a place where we shouldn't leave that place trying to run away from that contagious disease. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ has taught us to do in the Sunnah. Barakallahu fikum, jazakumullah khaira, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.